We're going to go in an unexpected, unintended direction today. And so just in the past couple hours, we pulled a different class today than the one that we were planning to have. I really was planning a class in which there would be a lot of interaction, and I wanted to, bring people up to do some different things. But things have moved in a new direction. You may have heard the news that a young man was killed by the police here in State College. And yesterday afternoon. And so he was black, of African ancestry, and what I want to say is I want to talk about that. Not that in particular. I want to talk about violence and killing and police and U.S. culture. And I just think we need to do that, and we need to contextualize it. And this hits home in several different ways for me, because A, I've been living in this town for a long time. B, his father is a colleague of mine. So that means something. C, I know a lot of police in town. And there are police officers in this town and in the university and the region who were students of mine. And I have a lot of connections to the police. And so just as I have a lot of connections to the military. So much of my work in these past number of years has shifted toward addressing issues with the military in particular, and finding ways to build bridges between, or create deeper understandings between the military and civilians in conflict zones to reduce the likelihood of violence and unnecessary death, not just on the part of civilians, but also on the part of military personnel. And I've lost friends and I've lost colleagues because they didn't agree with some of the positions that I have taken and that my wife and I have taken, which is that under all circumstances and under all conditions, people need to talk. And people in power need to engage people with less power. And it is in the interests of everybody when that happens. But not everyone thinks that it's okay to be working with big institutions like militaries, and that's just really supporting them and reproducing those institutions of power. And I would have thought that in the past, but I don't think that now. And just because I've seen too many things. So we're going to have this conversation about violence, the police, incarceration, the state. And we're going to have a guest. And let me say a couple things about our guest. Chenjerai, Dr. Kumanyika, was a student in the very first Social 19 class that I taught in the fall of 1991. And he was a very interesting 17-year-old who had just graduated high school and was by far more insightful than most everybody in the class. Graduated Penn State, went on to have a music career, and was really pretty successful in the music industry. By successful, I mean wrote a number of records that went gold. And it's just, played in some, played all around the world, was particularly popular in Europe with his group. And they were called the Spooks. And he was always a thinker and always had this idea that I knew that one day he would go back to school and get his PhD because he just had to. And even when you listen to his music, it's just like a different level. The lyrics are just at a different level than the lyrics of the vast majority of what comes down as pop music or hip-hop music or whatever is the popular music of the day. And finally he did came back to Penn State and got his PhD a number of years ago and is now a professor at Rutgers. But that's only part of it. He's also an activist. He is also a podcaster that won a Peabody Award with a podcast that he did with a colleague on the Civil War. It was called Uncivil. Was really super popular last year. And is just an all-around, really intense thinker. And I would argue one of the most intense thinkers with whom I have the pleasure of interacting on a regular basis. And so we just were kind of going back and forth today, and I said, hey, why don't you come into class? Because he's been on the ground in a lot of this, and just really has a lot of very interesting things to say. And so we were bringing him into the class. So, Chenj.
Hey, what's going on? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you, man. We got you.
Awesome, man. And I can hear y'all. Y'all sounding good.
Welcome back to 100.
Some of y'all are looking good. Most of y'all, honestly, quite frankly.
Simon in the front here just had his massive salad, so he's ready to go.
Yes. All right. Well, respect to Social 119, y'all. Yo, let me just say, while we're talking, I need y'all to do stuff like nod real big if you hear me. Do y'all hear me? Because I can't. You guys all look like little heads. I just want to say real quick before we start a couple things. One, I got so much respect for y'all. You should know that by coming into Social 119, you part of a tradition. This class has been partially responsible for so many of the things I did because really in this class is part of where I learned how to think. Sam and I don't, obviously, as we'll get into, we don't see eye to eye on everything. But one thing Sam taught me that's crucial is how not to let one set way of thinking or ideology stop your learning. So I always keep learning, and I've checked in with Sam, and you guys are part of that tradition. People that come out of Social 119 have wound up, as you see, doing really important things. So much respect to y'all, and I hope you appreciate the chance you have to be in this class.
Listen, man, thanks. I'll sing you your check for saying that, all right?
No, it's real talk, you know what I mean?
Nah, listen, man. But the fact that they get a chance to hear you is really, really, really important because you've gone far beyond where I have imagined that I would go. Let's just start here. I'm going to put a couple things out here, and I'm going to talk for a few minutes, and then I'm going to have you jump in.
All good.
So this statement right here, the world is more violent today than in the past, and this is really going to frame much of what we're going to talk about. And if you ask most people in the United States, most people anywhere in the world, they're going to say, oh yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's not true. All of the data that we can see, left, right, and center, are showing that the world's actually less violent today. And what you need to remember is that, you see violence on the news all the time because it's rare. What makes the news and what makes the front page and what makes the headlines are always the things that don't happen very often. If they happen on a regular basis, it's not news. Because they happen, things that happen seldomly, things that rarely happen, make the news, and they're in the headlines, especially above the fold. So that's the reason, you see murder and robbery and kidnapping and wars and these kinds of things, because they're rare, and that's why they're in the news. The news doesn't have some big conspiracy, so to speak, on there. It's the nature of it. So we need to start there, but that's the thinking. And that's the thinking that's driving people to support the kinds of policies that are directing and shaping not only this country, but very much the world. And the second thing that I want to say that's going to shape a little bit of what we're going to talk about is violent criminals should be locked up or in prison. Just this idea of violent criminals, violence, criminals, lock them up, throw away the key, this really sort of hard talk. And what do we mean by violent criminals? What kind of violence are we talking about? Who are the criminals, and what do we mean by locking them up in prison? And then thinking critically about the implications of that. So, change. Let me keep going. So as I was putting today's class together, I got an email, and an email was a journal and a journal article that somebody sent to me that just came out. And I started reading the journal article, and it was about police use of violence and force. And so I read the abstract, and here's what they said in the abstract. This is a sentence. The recruits' decisions, they were studying recruits and their trainers and how those recruits were making decisions in their training about when and how much force to use. And the recruits' decision-making was more aligned with an intuitive style than with an analytical style. And the intuitive style fundamentally is their emotions. And the primary emotion that recruits were using to determine whether they should or should not use force was fear. Fear. The fear that pervades the thinking of officers of the law, and also what I have found in my work with militaries of soldiers who are deployed around the world. Fear. So change. Just go anywhere with any of that as to start us out.
Well, I guess what I would say is, when we talk about the issue of police and, police violence, right? How the police become violent. I come from a tradition of, being an activist, right? And, supporting families whose children have been killed. I mean, just imagine for a minute that you have a family member, some of you might have, who's been killed by the police. It's very hard to get accountability from the police to even find it out. So I come from that tradition of activists, working with Black Lives Matter in Ferguson, working with Black Lives Matter in South Carolina, where it's very hard. People are very pro-police, working with black and white families. I worked with a white family in Clemson, South Carolina, the parents of Zachary Hammond, when their 19-year-old son was shot by the police. He was unarmed. And as you see in the video, not really dangerous. So I come out of that tradition and, wanting to understand that moment. Like, what is it, right? Is it actually, how much does racism play into it? Right? Because typically that's what we say, right? Y'all know the argument is that from a lot of activists is that it's racism, right? And of course, police look at that, or if you have a family member, how many of y'all have family members in law enforcement? Just to keep it real, raise your hand if you have a family member. I don't actually call it law enforcement anymore right. So, if you have family member and people are saying your family member is like a horrible person, and some of the way that sometimes activists do, it doesn't resonate, because you could feel that like something's wrong when somebody gets killed, but you also know that your person is actually going out every day trying to sacrifice and trying in a way to serve people, even though it doesn't always end up like that. And so these are the problems I've been wrestling with as an activist, to try to figure out what are the facts to apply. Say, if we get past all the sides in this, what does the facts reveal about how this system works, right? And one key question I started to ask related to this is, a lot of times when you look at these cases, it comes down to this question: did the police follow procedures, right? Everybody, right? Everybody, you hear what I'm saying? If you don't agree, it comes down to that. I want to see if y'all with me or not, right? A lot of times it comes down, did the police follow procedures? But the question I think we should be asking is this: why do police who are following procedures, why does that result in death and violence so often? When police follow procedures, like they're totally following the rules, and yet someone winds up dead. So I'll stop there. But like, as an activist and somebody who really wants to, save people's lives, advocate for families, but also I'm thinking about the officers, right? Because it must suck to be an officer who has killed somebody and that person didn't have to die. So to me, it's like looking at that question, thinking about all those things.
So so when you say following procedures, this is part of the tragedy, right? Because when people follow procedures and somebody is killed or somebody is not killed, I mean, this is, again, it's the first thing that happens. So the question is, how is it that we get to this place where the procedures that we are using and we are telling the police to follow, or the militaries, whatever it is, can lead to so much destructive behavior, destructive action? Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing is, I will just say this. Now, because I'm a police activist, right? I remember being in Clemson, South Carolina, and they asked me to participate in a dialogue between the police and youth, black youth in South Carolina. So I was in a church, and I show up at this church, and they got all these police officers there, and they got all these black youth in there. And the sheriff shows this video, and the video is a montage of nothing but regular citizens pulling out guns on police officers and shooting the police officers. Now, Sam probably has data to show that happens in a minority of cases. The vast majority of traffic stops are safe for police officers, right? But the police officers are being trained. They're being shown that one time when someone pulls out a gun, and that's being played over and over again and heightened in their mind, right? So that's one kind of fear, right? There's another kind of fear too. I would encourage everybody to watch a documentary called Crime Plus Punishment. Because I was in Ferguson, right? And part of y'all, I just want to say, we were in Ferguson. We used to do this chant that was called, we used to say, back up, we want freedom. All these racist ass cops, we don't need them. This is people in the streets trying to get transparency and trying to deal with the racism in the police department. I mean, I think there is racism in the police department. There's a racist culture in most police departments. That doesn't mean each individual police officer hates black people or hates people of color. I think actually there's more of them. Maybe I think there's more of them who don't. But we were talking about that. But that same Ferguson protest led to a federal task force on policing. And what they found was that police officers were being asked to pull over more people than they should because those stops would lead to more money for the local government. This is what the federal task force systematically found, right? Not somebody's opinion. This was facts. They said the police were shaking down, I think something like over 70% of the people in Ferguson were in relation to that police department. So that's another kind of fear. That's not fear that's necessarily making you kill somebody directly, but it's fear that's making you pull over more people than you should, right? And which means the more people you pull over, the more people are going to wind up in a dangerous situation.
So let me go back to the chant really fast. But you wouldn't support that chant today. Like, that's not the approach. We were talking about that earlier. Well, that's the journey I went on, right? I mean, at that time, the way I looked at it was, if you listen to Darren Wilson's interview about Michael Brown, you can clearly hear racism in that interview. Mm-hmm. He talks about, every time a police officer pulls over, stops a black person, they talk about how they look like big gorillas. Before they pulled over, I think it was Philando Castile, they were talking about how he looked. There's so many examples of this. So at that time, my analysis of the problem was that police were individually racist and didn't like black people and was feared black people, and that's why all these killings were happening. That was my analysis. And now that's actually not my analysis anymore. It's not that I don't think police are, that plays a role, but a couple of things changed that. The first thing that changed it was Zachary Hammond, a white kid got killed in Clemson, South Carolina. He got shot in the same way. If you pull up the videos, I encourage all of you. Anything I say, I want you to look it up, fact check, we critically thinking here. And he got killed in almost exactly the same way a black person would be killed. The police pulled up on him, shot him unarmed. So now I had to start thinking, well, what's going on here? It can't be race, right? Because he's white. But the other thing that happened was I started talking to police officers, right? And when I talked to police officers in South Carolina and elsewhere, a lot of them were like, look, we agree, there's really a problem. And we don't like having to pull over more people.
right? But we have to do it because it's our jobs. Now, when police officers, and I would ask them, I would challenge them. I would say, well, why don't you challenge? Why do you stick up for the other police officers when you know they're doing wrong, when they're framing people? And they would say, look, man, it's a complex system. Now, I don't agree with that. I think that's a moral failure. I expect them to stand up. And it's a moral failure with racist consequences. However, what it revealed is that these police officers are feeling a systemic pressure, right? And that even if you are the most woke cop on the force, you still are under economic pressure from your boss. The choice you have to make if you're a woke cop, and there are a few woke cops, that woke cop still has to decide if he's ready to get fired, or he has to pull more black people over. I mean, this is what you'll see in the New York in the Crime and Punishment documentary very seriously. So now, when I'm saying that quote, all the racist ass cops, I'm saying, well, dag, okay, if there's a police force and you got, let's just say 100 cops and 10 of them are explicitly racist, but then there's 90 who are like, don't see themselves as racist. That 90 cops is pulling over more people, and they're really the people who are implicated in this racist system, right? It's not their individual. So I realized, like, I'm actually, by focusing on the racism of individual cops, I'm not actually addressing the fear that even the woke cop that Sam talked about, that even the woke cops experience. I'm not talking about the economics of policing, how police are pressured. So in a way, what we need to be talking about, this is counterintuitive. And I want to repeat, yes, I think there's a real problem with racism in police culture. We know that there's police who are white supremacists, but the real systemic problems with policing are not about individual racism. It's about the way in which cops are incentivized to pull everybody over, all kinds of vulnerable people, by the way, people with disabilities, not just people of color now, women, sometimes who are vulnerable, sex workers, right, Latinos. What if you, in places like Montana, Native Americans, indigenous people, right? So if we go through that similar lens, and I argue sometimes with activists about this, even though myself, as an activist who's working right now in Philadelphia on this issue, because and let me be clear, y'all. And once again, I know you hear me getting passionate, but I'm a black man who's coming from a place of love and wanting to protect vulnerable people. And I know y'all do too. So y'all hear me through my passion. But this is what I'm saying. A lot of people get professor jobs. I got this PhD. I got some awards for journalism. I won a Peabody Award. My podcast got millions of people listening. That makes a lot of people conservative, and all of a sudden they start doing like Common did and be like, we got to reach out a hand of love to white people. This is not about that. This is not about that. All right. Because first of all, social justice is always about love. It's about the kind of love that you have to have when you transform systems. This is about getting to the root of the problem. How can we protect Zachary Hammond, the white dude? How can we protect? Because changing the police department in Clemson, South Carolina, actually for Zachary Hammond and with that case would have the effect actually of making it more just for all the black people in South Carolina. And so it's about looking at the way in which this should be something that unifies us when we try to get these answers. And we should really be looking at, if you have a family who's in law enforcement, rather than arguing against the activists, what you should be asking is this: do I really want my family member to go serve a mentally ill person with a gun? Because they're probably going to end up hurting them. And then that's going to be a terrible situation for them. Why do we have a system that sends people with guns to go help people when you should have a mental health professional doing that work, right?
Let's move.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, I get. So hyped,
here's
y'all.
one. So I got the slide. I didn't send you my slides ahead of time. You can't see that, right? Yeah, I don't think you can see. Okay, so listen, it's the 1033 program that started in the early 90s about giving military weaponry to police officers. So about $6 billion we're giving to local law enforcement. And the idea here is that at some point in time in the United States, we made some decisions about law enforcement, about the role that police were going to play in the United States. And we came up with this term, paramilitary policing, meaning that police who are organize, presumably, the idea that we have, police, although that's never been true really historically, but just go with me on this for a second, all right?
Totally, yes.
So the idea that police are organized to protect and to serve, to protect innocent people, and to make sure they serve justice, right? And to enforce laws, could best do that if they were trained paramilitary style, including have paramilitary weaponry. And so what does that do to a mentality of a society when you see police officers walking around like this, instead of walking around with maybe even not a gun on their side? What does it do? Well, what happens is we develop this consciousness and this ideology in the United States that, well, we need police like this because the world has become a violent place. It's more violent today than it ever has been at any point in history. But what if that's not true? And what if we don't need police like this? But rather, what if police, paramilitary police, emerged as a movement, as part of an institution for another reason? What if there's something else going on? And how would we know that? And what would that something else be? And maybe it's not about black people. Maybe it's really about all people. But what happens is the race divide puts a line and a wedge right down between us. And maybe it's not about police and non-police. Maybe the police are victimized. In fact, Chen, I think you would argue that police are more victims, as much victims as anybody. Maybe the police are just as victimized by this mentality in this culture of fear that just winds itself into every aspect of our being and our culture, that we would think that it's okay to have police like this in the United States when we don't need them. Like, what is that? Like, this is the question. So this class isn't about activism per se. It's not being pro-police or anti-police. It's about questioning, do we need paramilitary policing? And what's it mean that in the past few decades, we've given $6 billion of military-grade weaponry to police forces, including here in State College? And you see it come out when the students gather after a win in a football game or a basketball game or whatever the case is, and all the paramilitary police equipment comes out. And that's what you see walking down College Avenue, right there. The police in there and all of the tactical gear is what the photo is. I should have sent that to you. So this is this police state idea, Chenj. It's like, who does it serve? Like, somebody is being served by the creation of a police state. And it's not poor people, whether they're white, black, brown, doesn't matter. Like, who is being served by the creation of a police state?
Let me just say this, a couple things, folks. First of all, for those of you who are out there like, oh, this is a typical partisan divide, I think that under President Obama was one of, he contributed tremendously to the militarization of the police. All right, tremendously. I was at Trump's inauguration, okay? During Trump's inauguration, there was all kinds of SWAT police there, fully militarized police kettling people, right, who were peaceful protesters. I have the video footage I can show you. Those were hired by Obama, not Trump, right? Because Trump wasn't even in yet. But to really get at it, right, one of the things I've learned in Social 119 is how to confront facts to challenge what you already think. So I like facts. I like empirical arguments that we can, and facts that we can verify, because they're kind of cozy, right? It's like they're right there and we have to face them. So one of the things you got to deal with the police is, where did the police come from, right? What is the history of the police in this country, right? Most people, even a lot of criminal justice people, can't even tell you where the first police department was in this country. And when you study the history of the police, one of the things you find out is that policing really has a couple of different origin points. It's a kind of a complex history, right? In fact, I'll tell you, some of you may already know in the South, hold on, in the South, they started slave patrols, right? That's only true in certain states, though. People think that, all the police are slave patrols. That's not the way to do that history. But it is true that in the Carolinas and Virginia, the slave patrols and police were very much intertwined institution. Because in the beginning of this country, there's no police institution that looks like what you have now. People are like, oh, of course you have police. It's like, no, but not in the 18th century when America started. There wasn't tanks rolling down the street, right? There wasn't even police patrols. You had constabulary systems, almost no police to speak of. So how do we get to this point where, in my neighborhood in Philadelphia, you might see police coming in full military gear, right? And as Sam said, what does that do when you claim you're supposed to serve a community, but you're coming in camouflage to a community and saying you're supposed to serve them, and you're the way that you envision yourself, right, as an officer is like a military soldier facing down an enemy, and you look like that to the people. I mean, it's just like, no matter what you think, that's a difficult way to provide a kind of service. So what's the history of that? And what you find is in the North, one of the things you find is that the first police forces really are hired by business people, right? They're almost like private security forces. Everybody in here, I want you to quickly Google Pinkertons. Google the Pinkertons. This is the first detectives in the United States of America, the very first. Look at that history. The Pinkertons were hired for a lot of things, but they were primarily hired by people who own coal mines. At one point in 1933, I just found out that the coal and steel owners had more of a military arsenal than the United States military. The steel owners did. Even one steel plant. My point is to say, police becomes a part of that history, and the origins of the police really in the North are a military force to suppress working class people, to make sure that labor doesn't rise up.
Yeah, to control the workers. Yep.
To control workers. This is historical facts, folks. Look it up. Challenge me.
And so
Chens,
when you said the idea that, in your neighborhood in Philly, you can have police going down the street in full tactical gear, which is what we're looking at in the photo here on the screen. And by the way, Jeff just sent you our PowerPoint, so you could open it up on a second screen if you want. The question is, the response from people is, well, of course they need to dress like that. It's a really dangerous job. And I respond, the world is less violent today than at any point in human history. Like, maybe they don't. Maybe that is an ideology that somebody else is putting into our heads so that we allow certain things to happen, so that certain people can hold the reins of power and control everybody else and then divide us all. And so as long as we keep the people at the bottom divided, and the police officers who are, generally speaking, not coming from upper class families, not coming from upper middle class families, and only until very recently are coming from working class families, we can keep everybody divided, and then nobody's looking at anybody at the top. Chens, I'm going to pass by the Ferguson stuff because I want to show that video of just so we can just show this, right? Because I feel like this is police in the UK. This is that last video. We're not going to show the sound.
I don't have the thing here because you didn't send me this prior to me getting the link.
Oh, yeah. Second, we're going to switch. I want to show my class.
No doubt.
This is that one with the guy with the machete. What's that? No audio. Yep, no audio. Here we go. Watch this. This guy has a machete. These are cops in the UK. So here he is. He's chasing them. Look at all the cops here. They could shoot him in a second. In the U.S., he'd be dead already. But look how they don't have to. And I started looking at these videos. There was one after another, after another, after another. And you say, well, of course you have to shoot him. He's got a machete. He's dangerous. Look, they don't have to. And what this guy is saying here basically is, hey, this guy in the U.S., he's dead. He's already dead. We would have shot him 25 times. Why aren't they shooting him there? He's swinging a machete at him. Why is it that in our paramilitary policing, our way of dealing with this is to kill? He's mentally ill. He's a mentally ill human being. How many of you have people in your family who are mentally ill? It's like, and they go off their meds. And what happened? They should be killed? So he has a machete. So look at all those cops. They didn't have to kill him. Could have been 2 police officers. There are other videos where it's just a couple of police officers. And the guy comes at him with a gun and they just run in the other direction. Or the guy comes at him with a knife. And then they come back. And another person, the guy has a gun. And they just say, like, all right, we're just going to stay out of the way. And so this is the question, right? You say, we can't do that in the United States. Why can't we do that in the United States? How is it that most people in situations like this who come after the police in any way are mentally ill? Just back off, close the door, take a couple minutes, and figure out what we're going to do. Why do we just kill? What is the mentality? You know, what's really interesting is that the first time I got involved with the military, it was with special operative guys. And Lori and I had this meeting with these special ops people. And they were Navy SEALs, and mostly Navy SEALs, but there were also Army Rangers. And these were all people who had gone behind the lines in Afghanistan and Iraq, man. Like we didn't talk about it, but they had killed many people. These were people who had seen things and done things that you just aren't going to talk about, okay? The reason that Lori and I got pulled into this, Chenj, is because these guys were like social workers. They're like, look, you got all these Americans back home swinging the flags and cheering on and saying, go kill them and kill them all and doing that. We're out there doing the work. And what we're saying is we need less guns and we need more conversation. We need to find ways in which people like us do not have to kill somebody, that we can go behind the enemy lines and we can actually talk to people. We can engage. Because what we find is when we do that, all sorts of really non-nefarious things happen, like good things happen, and people don't die. And most importantly, we, the soldiers who are doing the dirty work, are less likely to die. And so I think, wow, we have this in the UK. I'm like, why? What is that? It's not a given. It's not a given. Yeah, that's...
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So here,
go ahead.
Chenj, you have my PowerPoint open?
No, I don't, but what's up?
Open
What
it
you got?
really fast. We're going to go on that slide with incarcerated Americans. What happened right here, my friends, in the class? Take a look at 1970. Did Americans suddenly get violent starting right here? Did we just get more violent? Did something happen in 1970? Was that when like the really good weed came out from Jamaica, or Thai stick from Thailand instead of that, Mexican red that everybody was smoking and it turned everybody crazy? No, something happened in 1970 that somebody decided that we needed more laws and we needed to put more people in prison. Something happened. And when that happens, this is what I mean. If you go back to that very first thing that I said, we need to throw violent people in jail. Like, well, who are violent criminals? Who are we talking about? What violent people? And what are we saying? So, Chenj, this is the biggest thing here. And then in 1984, sentencing reform once again. And then look at that. Look at that. What would happen? So what happened? These are decisions that people make. What would you throw into that?
Well, I mean, I just would, the thing I would just say real quickly is, we got to think about when you think about it. I mean, one of the things that I think you got to do is you always got to be able to put yourself in the side of somebody who sees it differently, right? So hold on, I'm just trying to pull up my thing real quick for a minute here. Hold on. But I think okay, here we go. So if you're somebody who's saying, okay, like I can totally understand if you're saying, why don't people just listen to the police officer? Then you could avoid all of this, right? I mean, this is what people would say. A lot of people who want to, even in South Carolina, people would say, if people just listen to police officers, they wouldn't. and then they wouldn't do it, and it would just seem really simple. But the thing I would ask you, just for a minute, if we could just get really present for a minute and think about compassion, being compassionate to people, if we could just get present. I spend a lot of time with the families of people who have lost people with law enforcement. I don't want to use their stories in some kind of political way, but what I want to let you know is these are whole lives that are being lost. And what we're saying when we compare them to like the people in the UK is it worth 20 more minutes of policing, police backing away and using restraint? Is it worth an hour more to save a whole person's life? You know, to save a 19-year-old kid, Zachary Hammond, or the kid in Cleveland, Tamir Rice, who was 12 years old, to save his life, to back away for a minute and say, let him grow up, because those mothers and parents are just, they deal with that every day, imagining what their kid's life would have been like today. Somebody who had mental health issue, if they had been healed, right? What would their life be like today? These are whole lives. So when we think about this idea of if you resisted the police, you deserve to die. I mean, if you look at the comments on some of those YouTube videos about UK policing, people are actually on there saying this is an inefficient use of resources. Those police should have shot those mentally ill people faster to save our money. Think about what that means. One thing that happens is I always try to be really compassionate to human beings and try to be hard on systems that don't work. Can we accept for a moment we might have a system that doesn't work? If we have hundreds of people every year who, if they were in the UK, those people would be alive. Maybe we have a system that doesn't work.
And the police who carry the burden of
yes.
what they have to do and what they do. Because once again, going back to what you first said, the police 9 times, the vast majority of the time, and the reason police don't get prosecuted, and this is what people miss, the vast majority of the time is because they followed procedures.
Police follow procedures. They felt fear, but should they have been in that situation? When you look at Terrence Crutcher, who was who had a disability, called on the police and was killed, should that officer have been in that situation? I mean, I want to tread carefully because, Sam, you said something like we talked about police as victims of this situation. I want to be crystal clear. Police who are killing people bear a different responsibility, right? But I remember talking to a chief of police, former chief of police, on an airplane. I sat with him and we talked for 2 hours. And we exchanged views. And one of the things that he made me understand and feel that I didn't feel is how much responsibility it is to have a gun on you. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of responsibility. That's a burden. And what he made me understand is that's a traumatic burden to have a gun. And then now you're in a situation with that gun, fear, probably some training from some military people. And then now you got to deal with a situation and you kill somebody using your training, following what you were taught. But the problem is what you were taught wasn't to prioritize human life. Because all I'm offering, what I want us to think about is, if we say police's job is to protect and serve, one thing I see when I see, and I don't want to romanticize UK police. They gotta get some criticism too. But one thing you see in those situations is you start to envision them saying, the most important priority here is that we don't hurt somebody who we're supposed to be serving. We want to protect other people. We want to protect ourselves, but we want to keep people alive if they don't have to die. And American police are not allowed in a way to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, listen, I want to show this. I want to go 2 ahead. Here's some numbers that I got. Incarcerated in state prison who show symptoms of mental illness. 55% of men, 73% of women. This is very serious. So what are we talking about here? When we're talking about the activity, the things that are happening in the world and who is being harmed. The other side is, coming back 2 slides, here's the prison population. Look at This is the U.S. population, right? I don't have the numbers over here because I cut that out. So you're going to have to go. It's about 13% black. And here are the number of people in prison. I mean, look at this. Comparatively speaking, some people are bearing the brunt of this. So going back a slide, something happened in 1970, then something else took off in 1984. But some groups of people disproportionately experience the burden of these decisions. That's pretty hardcore. So here we go here, and then one thing changes this slide on the private prison industry. And you know, states sign contracts with prisons. So we built many, many more prisons in the past 35 years. Because obviously we have to deal with all of these new prisoners. All the people above here, those are all new prisoners, and they got to get housed somewhere. And so we build new prisons. And many of the prisons have become private, and they sign, instead of being owned by the state, they're owned by private industries. And then the private industries make a profit. And the private industries sign contracts with the state that says, hey, in all these states here, in all these ones, we have prisons that sign contracts with the state that says you will maintain X level of capacity in the prison. And if you go below that level of capacity, meaning there are fewer prisoners than this level, whatever is decided that is, the state owes the private prison company money. In other words, just keep arresting people. Keep putting people in jail. Just build it up. Once you build up these numbers here, and you build a prison system, you got to keep it filled. It doesn't mean people are committing more crimes. What it means is that we're going to maintain the sentiment that people are committing more crimes. And so we're going to see people as violent. And the police are going to be sent out. This is what you were saying. The police get sent out and have to arrest people. They don't want to. They have to do the traffic stops. They have to arrest a certain number of people for jaywalking. They have to do these things when they don't even want to themselves. And so, look, do you understand the intensity of that? The states have to keep a certain number of people in prison or they lose money. And all these people in state governments who, serve on these committees and boards, and they build this shit up, and some people get rich. And then I want to look at one final thing here.
Sam, I think you misspoke earlier, and I just want you to clarify. It's the state says you have to have this amount, and if they go lower, then the state makes them pay, or they
the state has to pay the private company for the empty bed. So you got an empty cell, right? And if the state says, well, we just didn't have anyone commit a crime, and so therefore we don't put anybody in the cell, like we didn't arrest anybody and we didn't sentence them to prison, then the prison has the right to say, oh, well, okay, well, you owe us money then because we have an empty cell. This is how it operates. So it's not about who's committing the crimes. It's about some people getting rich. And then, of course, who's committing the crimes? Right here, I'm going to show this one slide. This is just from Minneapolis. That is 70% white, 17% black in the city of Minneapolis. Do you see that slide, Chenj?
Yeah.
You got that? Look at, these are white arrest rates, black arrest rates. These are juvenile curfew and loitering arrests. Look, curfew meaning being out after a certain amount of time, and loitering just standing around, not doing anything. And look who's getting arrested. The red is black youth. The blue is white youth. Even though the blue is 70% of the population, so it should be opposite. Who is being harmed on this? Dude, so look at Chenjerai, look at me. When he's a youth, when I'm a youth, look at how much more likely it is that he's going to get arrested by the police. So how is it that you think, or can you imagine why it is that black people and brown people who see this, are more likely to see this in communities, are the ones that are speaking up? They're the ones that are talking about it. And then imagine white people sit back and they say, hey, why are you always talking about this stuff? Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, why are you talking about racism all the time? Racism's over. It's done. It's in the past. It's not in the past. Look at this. Look at that. Come on, man. Seriously. Look at that. Yo, white students. Look, just think about your family and your friends. If this was happening in your community, how pissed would your parents be? What would your grandparents be saying about the police, about the courts, about the state? How often would they be talking about all the racism against white people and all the ways in which white people are being taken down and all the things that are happening against white people? What's amazing to me, honestly, I have to say, is that when I see stuff like this, I'm just amazed that many black people can keep their cool and be calm and talk thoughtfully and rationally and in a mild voice about these issues and not just freak out on a regular basis. Because let me tell you, man, if I had children and that was what my children were going through, you would know. This is it. Those numbers they're mind-blowing, man. And so, Chenj, I think, so sometimes I hear some of the things you're saying and you sound like, oh, this guy, I know that some of my students are probably thinking like, wow, this guy's a little bit radical. But when I look at that graph right there, and that's one city. I could have pulled cities from all over the U.S. There were like 40 different cities I could have pulled from. I pulled Minneapolis because something, when I pulled this up a couple of years ago, something had happened in Minnesota, so I just pulled it up. But it wasn't even the worst one. And I just think...
Yeah, my feeling is like, if you listen to what I'm saying and you think I'm radical, good. Because it shows you're critically thinking. You're not just sort of swallowing whatever comes from the front of the classroom. But what I would say is don't stop thinking. That can't be the end of it. If you're saying I'm radical as a way of just continuing to believe what you already believe, then, that's not critical thinking, actually, right? That's just defending what you already think. But you should start there. You can say I'm radical, but then you got to deal with these facts. You got to deal with the facts Sam is talking about. You got to deal with the system. What does it mean to have political systems that make money off of people being incarcerated? What does that do to officers? And you got to deal with the history. And then we got to have a conversation. It's like, about, and then be able to position ourselves in like somebody's shoes. Think about be able to sit in the viewpoint of a police officer, of a person who's been, and definitely of a parent who's lost a kid, or, I as a black man who's grown up in this country, it's super real for me because every time, I remember being stopped in South Carolina by a police officer one night, and I had left my license at home because I came out to pick up my wife. And, I didn't want to leave my wife standing out in the dark too long, but I had gotten my license, right? So the police officer says, let me have your license. And I said, officer, I'm sorry, I forgot it. I'm a professor at the university, right? He said, he said, oh, why'd you forget your license? Where's your license at, right? He starts like reaching for his thing. And I was like, yo, man, calm down, man. I'm just trying to pick my wife up. Like, I work on this campus. I'm trying to pick my wife up, right? And all of a sudden, he like really gets shook. And he goes, yo, why are you raising your voice at me? Now, the question I have for you at that moment, right? I'm not a criminal. I teach probably maybe his kids. How many more beats in that conversation before I got a bullet in my head? Because he felt threatened, right? But really, okay, I should have had my license, but so he's like, yo, so what? He's like, yo, why are you raising your voice at me? So I'm pissed now because I'm like, man, my wife is out here, you stopping me. So I was like, okay, officer, all right, now I got to make myself small, right? I'm sorry, officer. I apologize, officer. I should have had my license. Then all of a sudden you see this dude, this police officer just kind of smile, right? Yeah, okay. Because now his authority is back, right? But it's just like dealing with that, right? Now at that time I can't do some systemic critique of why he's there. Why is the university hiring him? All this other foolishness, right? Why are you pulling over professors at night? That's your job, really? I can't do that. but it is a factor, you know. And it's like, I actually understand where he's coming from. He's a working class person who has to do that job to feed his kids.
And he doesn't know what you might have in your car. He doesn't know what your intentions are.
Yeah.
He doesn't know this. He doesn't know
He
that.
doesn't. But if we're keeping it real, I know because I know the sheriff because I did that dialogue. I know what videos he's seeing. And he's not getting scientific, systematic information about it. He's getting scare tactics.
Yeah.
A montage of police officers being attacked.
So one of the reasons that Lori and I got hired by the military is because what they saw was they had an unreasonable assessment of danger. And that when they were going into communities in Afghanistan and Iraq and so on, they were going in as though every single person is a threat and every single person wants to kill them. And they came to see, look, that actually makes it more dangerous for us because we act in a way that increases the likelihood of violence. And so they said, look, what do we got to do to really have a more realistic assessment of what the threat is in these conflict and war environments so that we actually could go into communities and interact with people in ways that will make it more safe for us and also less likely that we're going to bring harm on innocent civilians. And I thought, man, that's completely reasonable. And in a way, if you think about it, what you're saying is, look, we're all kind of victims in this big,
I think bad systems,
charade.
They victimize everybody.
Dude, that has to keep, look, I'm going to go back to this slide, that has to keep all these people in prison somehow. You got to keep arresting people. You got to keep them all in prison. And I'm saying, well, why don't we just go back here? Okay, so we have more people in the U.S., so we're not going to go back here. Let's say we're going to go here. Well, why all these? Why is that? So the other side that I will say is if you have family members who are police officers and so on, look, nothing that Chenj or I'm saying is anti-police. What we're talking about is a system in which everybody becomes a pawn in that system. And everybody has to act in ways that's not necessarily in the best interest and in ways that's more likely to produce violence. So here's this other piece, Chenj, that I put up this. I saw these data from this study that rich black kids have a greater likelihood of going to prison than poor white kids. Rich white kids have a greater likelihood of going to prison than rich black kids have a greater likelihood of going to prison than poor white kids. So my question is this. Are black people that much more violent? Are black people committing that many more crimes? Are black people that much less likely to listen to police and follow the things that they're supposed to do? Does that make sense for this? Are black youth really doing that much more loitering and more likely to be out at curfew? And here's how we know that it's not the case. Because we do research on that. And we compare black kids and Hispanic kids and Asian kids and white kids who are doing the exact same things. And we watch and we control for all of the factors and forces that could explain the numbers like this. And we find that basically we don't see that. We don't see it at all. By the way, the person that just came online is my colleague down at NATO. By the way, I'd like to bring him into this. Mm-hmm. And here's one more, Chenj. This one here, this is from Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. Baltimore 15 to 19-year-olds are worse off than the average youth in Ibadan, New Delhi, Shanghai, and Johannesburg. And Ibadan is the largest city in Nigeria, if you don't know. Look at that. Black 15 to 19-year-olds in Baltimore who are mostly black youth. So last night we listened, I think I told you that Brian Stevenson was here. And do y'all remember the first thing he said that we needed to do? That everybody needed to do to change the world? And the first thing was, we have to get proximity to people. People who are poor, people who are not like us, people. And I think I look at that and I think, what do people in this classroom, how many of you know, have had proximity to 15 to 19-year-old youth in Baltimore? Like, and you get it, and you know what that means. Hey, Chenj, I want to see if anybody, who's got a question they want to ask? Can you just come up here and you can ask it in the, and who else? Who else has got a question? Go, come down, bro. Yep. You can look right in here. That's where he is, man.
All right. I know you talked about.
What's up, man?
What's your name?
Terrell.
Terrell, what's up, man? Respect.
Nice to meet you, man. I know you were talking about how like you tend to question like officers when they say like they're just doing their job and stuff. Like, how much do you think that has to do with lack of education? And like, I don't know if you know, but like only 8% of police departments in the U.S. they only require a college degree. So.
Right. Yeah. No, I think you raise a great point. I mean, I think that basically what I think is police officers are not prepared. I mean, there's two ways to look. Remind me your name again?
Terrell.
There's two ways to look at this. One way is to say police officers aren't prepared to do their job. They don't receive enough training. They don't receive the kind of education they would need. Like, most police officers have never seen a presentation like what y'all are getting today. Just think about that. What y'all got in one lecture, most people on the street with guns, empowered to use them, have not seen something like this, right? So to that extent, you're right, Terrell. But the other way to look at it, and this is like just to push on that a little bit, is what is the job of the police? Because if there's private prisons and the state are in a contract together, the state makes money from the fees, the private prison makes money from the beds, then that means the police officers are doing their job when they disproportionately arrest people. So it's terrible to think of the police's job as actually being to oppress people. Now, that doesn't mean that the individual police officer who's doing that is a bad person. Let's just assume all those police officers are good people, but that's their job. I would argue they have they're a good person in a job that is a bad system. So either way, they're not prepared. And the point you're bringing about education is really important. But I would also say there's a history going back to the 60s. After 200 different cities rebelled in the 60s, people started doing all these commissions and task forces, and this issue of police training came up. And the question you have to ask is, if people have been talking about police training since the 60s, why now in 2019 are we still having these conversations? Why is it so hard to train police? But thank you.
No problem.
Great question.
Yeah, it's really crazy to think that just keep arresting people, man. That's the job. You know what I mean? Damn. All right.
Hey, thank you for coming to speak with us today.
Hey, what's your name, man?
Tom.
Hey, Tom, listen, Tom's running for borough council, by the way.
Wonderful. Awesome. I respect that, man.
Hey, thank you so much. My question just is about the stigma of mental health and how it's affected incarceration rates, and more the misunderstanding and wrongful stigma there is. But furthering that, like, how can we address that as in a community, not only among ourselves, but further into our institutions and higher office, and also in police departments? Because at least what I saw yesterday and when I was reading the news is a very misunderstanding of mental health that has occurred.
I thank you so much for raising this super important issue, because I think that police officers are not alone in not understanding mental health. We all need to understand this disability, right? Which is really so often an invisible disability, right? I mean, we need to understand all disabilities better, and we need to get our disability movements stronger. But with mental illness, you don't always see it. So people with learning disabilities, there's people with learning disabilities in this classroom right now who actually have to make the case. Look, I want to learn. I'm trying my hardest, but I have this disability, and it's not respected and understood. And so if it's not understood in the classroom, if students sometimes have to make the case to a professor, imagine trying to make that case to a police officer with a gun. And so I think the police officers, connecting to Terrell's point, they shouldn't be the ones handling people who have mental illnesses, right? And we also, I teach media. Let's also look at how people with disabilities are represented in the media. They're villains, right? All these things. I mean, look at the most recent M. Night Shyamalan movie, right? Who are the villains? All people with disabilities, a person in a wheelchair, person with, who has like schizophrenic and things like that. So people with disabilities are represented first. We first learn to see them as villains, as others, right? We learn that maybe someone with a learning disability just isn't trying hard enough. The police officers don't have the education to deal with that, this patience and sensitivity to say, you can help someone. And then on top of that, they're given a gun and put into that situation. So if you look at, there's a report from the Atlantic, for example, that looked at South Carolina and found egregious violations of them when it comes to dealing with people with mental health. And the prisons are filled with people because actually, as the state starts to take money out of the kind of public services that would help people with disabilities, we wind up putting more money on police to deal with that problem. You see what I'm saying? And police are the wrong people to deal with that problem. So thank you for bringing up this important issue, Tom.
Thank you so much.
Hey, who else has a question? Who wants to ask a question? Bro, hey, I want to, Chinj, I want to move on. I want to say something onto that. So this morning,
by the way, Sam, I just want to say, anybody who's a creative person or a journalist, I gotta come back and talk about that. Y'all got me on this depressive stuff, man. I make podcasts. I want to help people, man. I want us to. But we'll get to that. I just want to say that. All right, go ahead.
All right, dude. All right, I got you. I got you. Hey, listen, real fast. You're gonna jump on, but I want to say one thing. This morning, Lori and I were talking, and she got her MSW in '86, I guess, and so one of the things they were talking about back then, Masters in Social Work, and her entire program was, hey, look, all of these, where there was a big shift in the federal government, and they're going to now expand the amount of money going to police and going to prisons. And that money was all coming from community mental health services. And it was just a given at the time that she reminded me that they all said, watch in 30 years, because all these people who are now receiving mental health services are going to all end up in prison. And that's exactly what we've seen. So, yo, go ahead, bro.
Hello.
We have 5 minutes,
Hey,
by the way.
what's your name? All right, I'm going to try to be quick
Matt.
fast. What's your name, man?
Matt.
Matt, nice to meet you. Respect.
Nice to meet you too. My question was just about, from what I understand, European countries and America have very different views and laws around guns and gun control. So what got me thinking was the video of the guy with the machete. They're all backing up, and obviously the choice of weapon there makes a huge difference in how they're like reacting to the situation. So I wanted to see what you thought about how the fact that like in America, I think it's so much easier for people and criminals to get guns. How does that affect how you think about the cops' involvement with situations like that?
Well, one thing I think it does. But one thing I think that's interesting to talk about is, the way that the people in the world who have the most training with de-escalation, which sometimes are a certain class of military people, not all soldiers, but some military people, right? How they actually deal with people with guns, right? I mean, and I think it's possible. You're right that it's more difficult to de-escalate when someone has a gun as opposed to a knife. But the question I would think that you have to answer is, are those police prioritizing the life of the person with who's doing this, right? Or are they like shooting when they don't even know if the person has a gun? There was recently I think it's a hip hop artist who was shot while he was asleep. Did you hear about this? Because they thought he was reaching for a gun, but he was asleep. So, the question there is like, if you have a process that's your de-escalation, the issue isn't really the gun. He didn't even have a gun. It's that you're not even prioritizing people's lives. You're rushing in, you're trying to deal with this fast and doing that. So I think that, so I think that what you see among the European, now in European countries, you actually see people disarming people with guns in a safe way and allowing them to actually survive a lot of times, right? And so I think that also shows you that our police don't have certain training that they need. But it's a complex issue. And for me, it's always about prioritizing protecting and serving people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Hey. All right, listen, hold tight 1 second, okay, y'all? Chenj, thanks for jumping in today on the spur of the moment. I appreciate it.
Much respect to y'all. I just love all of y'all.
Wait, hang on 1 second. Yo, y'all. Okay, go ahead, man.
Oh, much respect to everybody. I wish you success. Holla at me. I'd love to connect with you more on Twitter. I know y'all probably don't use Twitter. I'm on the gram too, so you can holla at me there. And respect, man. I appreciate it. And let's figure out a way to solve these problems, all right?
Thanks, man.
Peace.
Hey, also, let me just say, I think there is a vigil tonight, so I just want to put that out there to y'all. 7 p.m. Allen Street Gates. See you all.